Okay.
Okay, great.
There we go. Well, welcome back, everybody, and to any newcomers out there, it's nice to see you. Yes, you're all growing familiar to me too, and I love it. I hope all of you have been well. Tonight's film we're going to discuss, The People versus Fritz Bauer, originally titled The State versus Fritz Bauer. It's from Germany from 2015. Director's name is Lars Kraume. The film won 6 German Film Academy Awards, including Best Film, Director, Best Supporting Actor, Screenplay, Costume Design, and Production Design, deservedly so. And it was the German submission in 2016 for the Academy Award for Best International Film. Lars Kraume, the director, is an Italian-born German, and he has directed over 30 films since 1996, as well as The People versus Fritz Bauer. His feature films have garnered awards in many international festivals, and his most recent film, which was done in 2018, entitled The Silent Revolution, is another one concerning a true event. It was the persecution of high school students in East Germany in 1956. A group of high school students resisted the communist authorities by showing their solidarity with students in the Hungarian uprising. And what happened to them? It has been received with critical acclaim in this country, as well as many others, winning festival awards. So this film takes us to meet a genuine hero, a man who has been underappreciated. A lot of what he has done has only come out within the last 20 some odd years. Both the Israeli and the German governments had kept things secret for a long time. And finally, starting in 1996, things did come out. In fact, within the last year, there was some information that came out concerning what happens in this film, which I will get into. Anyway, in 1957 in Frankfurt, while a disturbing number of Nazi criminals had already fled Germany and taken up residence in South America, there were many who were still hiding in plain sight. Some even worked for large corporations in Germany, namely Mercedes-Benz among them. And a large number held positions of authority in Konrad Adenauer's government, in their secret police, in their secret service and their police. The question that this film gets into at that time was, were they above the law? Unfortunately, the Allies, most notably the US, were focused more on the Cold War with Russia at that time. And we need also to look no further than what the US was doing by absorbing a number of Nazi rocket specialists into the US to understand why they were not in a hurry to pursue any matters concerning Germans, Nazi hiding criminals. If it were not for Fritz Bauer, post-war German society and the justice system might have succeeded in suppressing the memories of both the concentration camps and the Holocaust itself, as well as keeping many of the officials of the Nazi Party supplanted in many government and industrial positions. This is a powerful and gripping portrait of a courageous man and his battle for truth and justice, and an important tribute to an underappreciated hero, a man who returns to Germany after the Second World War as a broken pessimist and discovers his calling in the fight against collective forgetting. The story is a familiar one, that of the ancient battle of an outsider against an all-powerful system, David against Goliath, if you will. And this was a battle that really took place, not in some invented comic universe somewhere. This is not one of those kinds of stories. To put it briefly, it's an emotionally gripping, timelessly inspiring tale of a hero who unflinchingly tackled his thorny subject and didn't shrink from posing uncomfortable questions to the Adenauer administration. He especially acted not out of revenge, but rather he was driven by a humanistic ethos and a drive to educate the young people in Germany. It didn't become known until after his death how decisive Bauer was in apprehending one of the most heinous among them, which was Adolf Eichmann. Bauer was born in 1903, and he was a staunch supporter of human rights from the time he got his PhD in Germany and under the Weimar Republic. But with the rise of Nazism, he was part of the formation of what was known as the Iron Front, which was an anti-Nazi organization, and they fought against whatever the beliefs were that the Nazis were trying to support. Anyway, he wound up standing trial several times. They got him on a number of offenses, one of which I'll get into in a little while. He wound up in prisoner camps before the war. He was able to get out. He escaped to Denmark before the war, spent a number of years in Denmark and then in Sweden, where he met Willy Brandt, who would become the mayor of Berlin. Finally, after the war in 1956, he was appointed Attorney General of Hesse and based in Frankfurt. Hesse. Bauer, he conducted covert investigations during that time, as you saw in the film, concerning Nazi criminals still at large, because neither the Federal Criminal Police, known as the BKA, nor the German intelligence agency had any interest in bringing one particular Nazi criminal, Adolf Eichmann, to justice. They feared he would incriminate a lot of senior figures in the Federal Republic of Germany. And while the film pivots on the search for Eichmann, it also reveals what Bauer is up against concerning the environment in Germany. You know, at the beginning of the film, which is really, the director takes some license with events. The event we see at the beginning where he falls asleep in the bathtub, having taken some pills and wine, that was something that happened at the end of his life. But he uses it here as a dramatic way to get into the film, which is to show how the police would use what happens against him, that they would create the rumors that he was trying to commit suicide. And as he says to his chauffeur, "I've got a gun. Why would I need to do it that way?" Anyway, it sets him up to meet with that bitter resistance from his own ranks, as most of the lawyers that were working for him at the time had already been active during the Nazi regime and feared for their own reputations, especially that one senior prosecutor, Ulrich Kriegler, who was working in league with the police, with the BKA, or the Federal Criminal Police Office under Gebhardt. Both were looking to get rid of Bauer. In fact, Bauer is famous for having said, "When I leave my office, every time I leave my office, I'm entering enemy territory." It turns out that the only one he can trust in the film is Carl Angerman, a prosecutor who becomes Bauer's friend and protege. It is interesting to note that Angerman is a fictional character. He's not real. In fact, there were 3 attorneys who worked for Bauer at the time and worked with him in these covert activities. And what the director does is for means of economy, incorporates those 3 into one, and also creates a story around that one. But it is the letter from Lothar Hermann, a gentleman in South America and Argentina, that puts Bauer on the trail that would eventually lead to Eichmann. Ironically, during the Nazi dictatorship, Argentina had become the 3rd most important country of exile for European Jews before and if they could get out during the war. And following the war, a growing number of fugitive perpetrators of the Nazi regime arrived there as well. It's ironic, having nothing to fear, they went there having nothing to fear under Perón's government. until his overthrow in 1955. And even then, the authorities after Perón were not much interested in pursuing Nazis in 1957. This is background that really isn't in the film, but it's important to understand what was happening. Thanks to Lothar Hermann, who was a former concentration camp prisoner, Bauer relayed information about the whereabouts, as we see in the film, in Argentina, of Eichmann to Israeli authorities. Hermann's daughter, as we've seen, his daughter Sylvia, began dating a man named Klaus Eichmann in 1956. Now, his daughter at that time was around 12 years old, and Klaus was 17. But he boasted about his father's Nazi exploits, and Hermann alerted Bauer, sending him that letter we see in the film. And according to Hermann, he tasked his daughter with investigating her new friend's family. Somebody has to mute themselves. She met with Eichmann himself at his house. And she said that Klaus told her that he was her uncle, his uncle, when he came home. But when he arrived not long after, he was addressed as father by Klaus, which led on to Sylvia telling her father. In 1957, when he passed the information to the Mossad, there was no concrete evidence initially found. They were resistant.
Excuse me. Oh, excuse me. Everyone, please mute yourselves. We hear somebody in the background talking. Thank you so much.
But you can mute everybody. Please do.
Yes, I'm going to. I'm going to right now.
Thank you, Dora. Anyway, in 1957, he passed the information to the Mossad, but they could find, or they said they had no concrete evidence found. Bauer naturally trusted neither. He didn't trust Germany's police nor the country's legal system at the time, and he feared that if he had informed them, they would have tipped Eichmann off. Thus, he decided to turn directly to Israeli authorities. Moreover, when he called on the German government in order to make efforts at first, later on, he didn't want him extradited to Germany, but at first he wanted him extradited from Argentina to Germany. The government responded negatively. But Bauer's only other ally in the government, as you've seen, was the minister president of the Hesse region, Georg August Zinn, who secretly worked with and protected his friend Bauer, even though he knew he was flirting with treason. If you remember, he says to him, what you're doing could be construed as treason by dealing with the Mossad, and to get Eichmann's arrest. Now, here's an interesting side note. In 2021, it became known that much more instrumental to the capture of Eichmann was a geologist who worked with him in Argentina. His name was Gerhard Klammer, and he worked with him at a mine in the 1950s, a construction company, excuse me. He provided Bauer, during Bauer's lifetime, during this period in the 50s, he provided Bauer with a photograph of Eichmann alongside himself, which was direct proof. At the same time, this Klammer was in contact with a priest and a bishop and a cardinal in Germany, to whom he sent the information with the photograph, from which he ripped his own face. So it was just a picture of Eichmann. Cardinal Kunz, who was the cardinal in Germany at the time, passed that evidence on to Bauer as well. Bauer's sources remained secret, and along with Klammer's recomposed picture of him with Eichmann, they were not revealed until last year, 6 years after this film was produced. So it sort of, again, confirms what Bauer was doing and nobody knew about at the time. As well as the leads from Argentina, Bauer discovered that the former Nazi Schneider, as you saw in the film, who worked in Human Resources Department for South America at Mercedes, he puts pressure on him to obtain Eichmann's code name in Argentina, to which they were sending him money and various communiques. And he provided that to the Mossad. But it was Bauer's attempt to have Eichmann try Germany that he ran into a wall. And he decided it wasn't worth it. It was important that he be tried in Israel. Also, Germany was reluctant to bring in Eichmann, not just because he could inform on other Nazis, but they were afraid that certain statements he would make in court would cause a government crisis, as they were dealing with Israel to sell them arms. So it was a very sticky situation that they had to stand back from. And while all this was going on, we're exposed to a subplot involving Bauer and Engelmann. Now, here's where, this is where we see Bauer, the human being. It was known that Bauer, this was a known fact, had homosexual leanings, having been arrested in Copenhagen, where he escaped to in 1936 for having relations with a male prostitute. Now, what the director does is shifts that over to Engelmann in the film rather than to Bauer. He did get married in Denmark for his own protection to a Danish school teacher who he fled with to Sweden, where I said he befriended Willy Brandt. They founded a newspaper against the Nazis. And we learn in the film that Engelmann, who is also married, becomes involved with the nightclub performer posing as a woman. And although the authorities, namely that Officer Gebhardt and Kreidler, the attorney, try to blackmail him, in the end, he does the right thing to protect Bauer. It wasn't until 1994 that what was known as paragraph 175, which they talk about in the film, of the German Penal Code, making sex between men a criminal offense, was finally lifted. It took that long to lift it. It had been reinstated it had been lifted at one point, reinstated during the Nazi government, and hadn't been lifted until 94. In reality, and as we saw in the film, when he appears on TV, Fritz Bauer opened a completely new perspective for the young people during the Adenauer era, because he dared to lift the veil and break the silence. And so of the Nazis in the government. And so he became an important source of inspiration later for the students of Germany during their demonstrations against the government. Films such as this, as well as Labyrinth of Lies, another great film about that period, in which Bauer is a critical character as well, they demonstrate that the process of healing, of confronting the shame of history and accepting the ills of former generations, can take lifetimes, as it has. But as I've said before, I've said it possibly to this audience and several others, Germany has been confronting this since it became united in 1989. There has been this new wave of German film and this so-called third generation of German youth who have become directors, writers, and have been confronting this history head on. And they do deserve a lot of credit as filmmakers, as novelists, working in television, film, and theater for doing this. They are at the forefront of dealing with the Holocaust and what happened in Germany, which was silenced for quite a long time. The detail in the film is just terrific. It captures the whole period. We see, seeing, especially having Fritz Bauer at the beginning, we see footage of him. And then we see Gerhard Klausner, the actor who portrays him, was terrific, his portrayal. But the film is interesting on another level. It's set up as a thriller, more so than a historical document, it becomes a thriller. And that was important. It's important for us. It's important for the audience because it draws us into the film. And hopefully, most of us, we're confronting Fritz Bauer for the first time. I'm sure a lot of you had never heard of him. And it's important that we do hear of him. I mean, this is a guy who really went all out and changed the course of history in Germany, if not the world, at that time, by helping to bring those certain people to justice. But also the jazz inflected soundtrack adds to that film noirish attitude. I love the music in the film. It really enhances the atmosphere, the thriller, the sinister proceedings. The set designs were fabulous. Bauer's office with that great painting, which was a real facsimile of the painting he had in his office. I mean, they really went all out to try and replicate the period, the cars, all of those things, and the costumes themselves. I mean, even down to the socks. I love the scene with seeing the socks in the magazine and Angerman and Bauer, which is the signal to Bauer that he can talk to Angerman and possibly help him. But it is the performances in the film, as I said, are real standouts. Bergleich Klausner, who portrays Bauer, is one of Germany's best known and well-respected, as well as award-winning character actors. He's appeared in over 90 TV and film productions since 1983, including the Academy Award-nominated The White Ribbon in 2009, in which he portrayed a German pastor, an evil German pastor, as a matter of fact, and the also Academy Award-nominated film The Educators in 2004, a satirical look at the German students who were protesting at the time. He was nominated for Best Actor and at the German Academy Awards as Fritz Bauer, and he went on to win the Bavarian Film Awards as Best Actor for his portrayal. Ronald Zerfeld, who portrays Angerman, was born in East Berlin and has appeared in over 30 films, including the Academy Award-nominated film Barbara, as well as Phoenix. He is which was a Phoenix, which was a post-Holocaust film, was dedicated to the memory of Fritz Bauer. The Silent Revolution, he's in that as well, the director's latest film, and is in the TV hit series. You can see him on Netflix in the TV hit series Babylon Berlin. He has won many major awards for his acting. Most notably, he did win the German Academy Award for Best Supporting Actor in The People vs. Fritz Bauer. It's following the example. Now, this film leads us up to not just Eichmann's trial, but also the first Auschwitz trials, which Labyrinth of Lies really leads to as a film. And there were numerous trials against Nazi criminals in subsequent years in Germany, but there wasn't a change over a long period of years in the dispensation of justice until the last few years, which was entirely in accordance with what Fritz Bauer was after, to no longer necessarily prove that the accused committed an individual act. In other words, that anybody that worked in the concentration camps, that worked in any capacity, in any occupation in the death camp, a tradesman, a cook, it was grounds enough that they be prosecuted as they assisted in the smooth operation of the killing machinery. So it didn't have to be proved that they did anything specific. Here was a case in point, and some of you may remember this, was the case against John Demjanchuk in 2011. It was a groundbreaking case as he was extradited to Germany, and the Second District Court of Munich sentenced him because he has worked as a watchman in the death camp at Sobibor for aiding and abetting the murder in thousands of instances. And they sentenced him to 5 years in prison because he had been part of the annihilation machinery, and therefore it was not necessary to prove he had committed a specific act. And this is what Bauer wanted to prove. As a result of this new case law, the trial of one man, his name was Oscar Grofning, which began in the District Court of Luftenburg in April of 2015. Now, these cases, some of them are still happening. He was accused of aiding and abetting the murder in 300,000 cases, and he didn't commit any murders, but he was a bookkeeper in the Auschwitz concentration camp, and he accepted money and valuables from prisoners and administered them. The case made headlines. It made headlines for a specific reason. Grofning, who was 94 years old by then in 2015, was one of the only witnesses, one of the only participants in the Holocaust to show signs of any remorse. Unlike the defendants in the first Auschwitz trials in Frankfurt, there's no doubt, he said, that morally I was an accessory to the crime. I admit this with deep remorse and humility, and I ask for forgiveness. If Fritz Bauer could have lived long enough to experience that, then out of the joy, that cigarette that was perpetually in his mouth probably would have fallen out. The Fritz Bauer Institute, which was established as a foundation under German civil law in Frankfurt in 1995, it works in the pursuit of crimes against humanity, not just Holocaust crimes. And as an independent cultural, it is an independent cultural institute, and it also researches the history and impact of nationalist socialist mass crimes, particularly the Holocaust. Fritz Bauer considered the Auschwitz trial a way for German society to use the legal system as an opportunity for self-reflection, to put ourselves on trial, to put Germany on trial, and to learn about the dangerous factors in our history which can never be repeated. So this is basically a breakdown of why this film came about, and I hope you appreciated it. And now I'd like to open it up for questions about the film, any comments you may have. So who's going to go first?
Shelly?
Yes. Yes.
This is Wendy Rothfield. I think
Hi, Wendy.
this was a monumental film that should go along with every Holocaust memorial should show this to everyone in the schools and universities, because what it did was it showed Germany, which was this great great civilization that prided itself on Bach, Beethoven, Heinrich Heine, and yet the Holocaust was what people will forever remember Germany for. And this film will bring that light to the world forever. It is so well done. I'm so glad you chose this film. It was a monumental film of history. Thank you.
Thank you, Wendy. I'd like to call on someone, but before I do, there's a couple of comments in here. There's, who's the HS? Who is HS? I'm looking to see. Okay, one is there's a new docudrama named Susan Mann. There's a new docudrama named The Devil's Confession, shown in Israel, looking for a U.S. buyer that has actors, but is interspersed with Eichmann's actual voice from interviews he did in Argentina. Yes, thank you for bringing that up, because as of a few weeks ago, it was revealed that they have found a number of recordings of Eichmann and photographs of Eichmann who met with a number of other ex-Nazis in Argentina, discussing the possibilities of his memoirs and his admittance to all of these crimes on tape. It really was admitted how he felt It's interesting because there's still things coming out about this. Jackie, you asked, why was it treason to deal with the Israelis? Only because at that time, Germany was not to have, for him to be working with the Israelis was a violation of his office as Attorney General, to be aiding another government in the capture of someone. It was a sticky thing. And Zinn never told anybody until the 90s that he had protected Bauer because he was skirting treason, is the way they put it. Whether or not they would have brought him to trial, they didn't, obviously, but they saw it as it could be construed as a treason act by those in the government who were Nazis. They would have pointed fingers at him. And also they were, as I said, Germany was working with Israel to sell them arms. And it was, and Israel was also selling them intelligence, technical intelligence. So it was a two-way street, and they didn't want to upset that balance at that time. And it's true. Bauer was not authorized to speak on behalf of Germany. Thank you, Susan. Okay. Now I want to call on, if she will volunteer, Clara. Clara, are you there? Can you unmute yourself?
Here I can.
Thank you. Would you like to contribute? I believe you have a lot to say.
Well, not about the movie exactly,
Yeah.
but I want to clarify something. People
Sure.
have a misconception about how many Germans went to Argentina, and the fact that they caught Eichmann, which is one individual, and not hundreds of individuals that came here actually to the United States, aided by the government of the United States, and they were Nazi criminals and were given positions in the government. And there were many of them. They believe that they are talking about a number of 3,000 people. I have a booklet called Nazi War Criminals in America, and this was taken from the Library of Congress, actually. So the numbers and the people named there are real. It's not an invention.
No.
So actually, the United States helped more Germans than any other country after the war.
Yes, yes.
Which is shameful.
It is. And also what was happening is there was also, we have to bring in the Vatican. The Vatican at the end of the war
Yes.
was part of what was known as the Rat Line.
Uh-huh.
The Rat Line was a way, and also the Red Cross.
Yes.
Through the Red Cross and the Vatican, a lot of high-ranking Nazis were able to get passports to go to
Yes.
South America. Eichmann, Mengele, there were a number of them that had escaped Argentina.
Mengele was not in Argentina. Mengele
Yeah, he was
in Brazil.
Well, he flew to Argentina first, then he went to Uruguay and finally to Brazil. They were on his trail
and
in
he
Argentina.
lived in Brazil, aided by the government, with
Yes.
police protecting him.
Yes, yeah, he was still conducting experiments too,
Oh,
up
yes.
until his death.
Yes.
Yes,
Yes, he did.
yes. But he had spent time in Argentina. In fact, the Mossad was onto him, and
Yeah.
before they can catch him, he escaped. And there was a woman Mossad agent who was on his trail who was killed. They have documentation of this, and it's in another film, which hopefully I will do at another time. But yes, so and I see you were also in Argentina when they captured Eichmann.
Yes, I was there. I was
What was
living there. I lived in 10 different countries.
Oh, wow.
And persecuted, of course, because my father was working for the underground, pulling out Jews from Germany, from Italy, from Spain. Yeah.
I'm sure it's quite an interesting.
A long story.
Yeah, one I'd like to hear, but unfortunately we don't have the time
I
for
know,
tonight, but
I
I'd
know.
like to hear it.
Yes, yes.
I hope I do. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that with us.
Okay.
Thank you. Anybody? Yeah, Mel.
Was the scene at the airport correct? Was that a true story where one of the pilots actually stayed behind?
Well, a lot of that is dramatic effect. A lot of it is dramatic effect. That's, that's hearsay. It's what we call artifact. Some of these things can be true. Some of them are apocryphal. They're made up for dramatic effect within the film, to add to the thriller aspect, naturally. So, there is truth in Fritz Bauer. There's truth in what he did to secure Eichmann and help the Mossad. Even when he went to Israel, he did go to Israel. And by the way, I have to tell you, the reason they wouldn't accept Lothar Hermann's testimony that his daughter had been dating his Eichmann's son and all of this was that Hermann had very bad cataracts and he couldn't see too well at the time. So they wouldn't trust his testimony for his lack of vision. This was documented. And it wasn't until 1996 that the Mossad, the head of the Mossad, who Bauer was dealing with, came out and said, yes, if it wasn't for Fritz Bauer, they never would have captured Eichmann. If it wasn't for Fritz Bauer, they never would have captured Eichmann. So they admitted to it, but it took that long. It took almost 36 years for them to admit his participation in the event. So, Dreja, I saw your hand up.
Yeah, I have a question. It appears that he took his own life, at the end. Was there, in your research, was there anything in particular that might have led up to that?
Yes, well, that led up to it. Not that it led up to it. I mean, it could have been his frustration. It could have been, his life was not, was colored with a lot of tragedy, and possibly, they said that, he died. He wasn't that old. He died 68. I mean, he was 65 years old. He took pills and alcohol. So it's purported that, either he did or didn't. I mean, that's ambiguous. We don't know, but he was a troubled man. He was a troubled man. That was well known. I mean, he had a lot of enemies in the government, a lot of enemies in the industries, and I'm sure it wore him down. It wore him down.
Yeah, and one of the things that I don't know, I guess really distressed me is a positive thing that he felt that it was very important to shine the light on the history, that it was important to know what happened. And what I see, the distressing part for me is what I see in this country where just the opposite is happening now. We need to erase the history, erase the truth of so many of the things that happened with the development of our country.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you for injecting that into it. By the way, I also have to tell you, Bauer lived with a tremendous amount of guilt. And the guilt arose from, in the 1930s, when he was in one of the camps, one of his lifelong friends at that time was with him. And they were asked to sign a declaration, which would get them out, but it would also betray who they were, and it would betray others. And Bauer signed it. His friend refused to sign it. And Bauer signed it, and he never forgave himself for signing that declaration. It was one of the lowest points of his life, and he lived with that. So I'm sure it contributed to his guilt and his feelings. Just so you know, he was a human being. He was a human being. Rhonda. Oh, I'm sorry. You finished, Dreja? Did you have anything else? Yep. Rhonda.
I was struck by the attire of what people were wearing. it didn't seem like it was from the 1950s. It seemed like maybe it was from the year 2000, the skirts and the blouses and the suits, all the way down to the socks. And, you know, I've always pictured people in the 50s with these flowing dresses and stuff, but they're very, very stylish for being 10 years after a war that destroyed Germany.
Well, it's interesting you say that, because they were looking, you know, these were people now that were looking ahead, and they were adapting all of these Western ideas. You know, well, hopefully, you know, Germany was on, you know, with the help of the Marshall Plan, naturally, with the help of others, that they were hopefully rebuilding themselves, especially West Germany. You know, at the time, you know, Germany was divided. And, you know, so West Germany was interested in building themselves up and looking at all of this. In fact, it was pretty close to what they were wearing, the clothing they were wearing. And by the way, you know, fashion comes back. It goes away, it comes back. It's retro. It's retro. So you can think of it that way. You can think of it that way. Thank you, Ron.
For those of us that remember the 50s, it was pretty accurate.
Yeah, I think it was. I think it was. Jackie.
I really liked it. This is one of my favorites that you have done so far. It's one of the only ones that sent me to Google constantly. I was glad I watched it at home, because I kept pausing it and going and Googling things, because this is something I knew absolutely nothing about. So I really liked it. I thought the pacing was terrific, even though a lot of the reviews that I read said it was very slow. I know how you feel about people who say that, but they said it was very slow. And I thought the cinematography was staggering. Several times when I paused it to go look something up, I took a picture thinking about, Julie, you'll appreciate this, possibly an art piece to do with it. So I thought the cinematography was fantastic, and I really liked this one a lot.
That's great. That's great. But do me a favor, Jackie. The first time you look at a film, let it go all the way through. Then look at it a second time and stop it to do your research. I want you to get the full impact. Okay.
I don't know how she did it, because I could not get away from the movie. And it was, for me, it's like one of the best that you have shown. Yes. And I didn't know anything about that story. And so for me, it was an impact. And I just wanted to say that the Germans, a lot of the Germans flew into Chile. I was at one time, I was in Chile, and one of the, it was a small town, but it was all German descendants. There were no, you know, everybody was from Chile. Everyone was from Germany originally. So it was really, you know, even the houses looked like Germany, everything, the gardens, everything. It's called Frutillar. So it was an impact to me. And we had the Kuchen that they are typical of Germany, you know, those very special pastries that they make with apple. Yeah.
Interesting. Interesting.
It was just
Okay.
a aside, but I just remembered.
Anybody else? Anybody else have anything? Susan?
I was just going to say that Jackie, I too could not Google. I just couldn't take my eyes off the screen. I couldn't stop watching. And it was interesting to me because I didn't know a lot of the dynamics of the governments at that time, how you couldn't do this and couldn't do that because they were negotiating this and negotiating that. And that Germany, he couldn't bring him back to Germany. You know, he couldn't contact Israel to do that. And when he was dealing with Israel, I just knew that Israel wasn't going to give them Eichmann. That was just not even in my head. I didn't see them doing it. So I thought this was an excellent film, and I learned a lot that I didn't know, and I never knew about this man. I absolutely knew nothing about him, and what an important role he played. And the other things were that really, I guess, got to me was the how the characters played in, and how he was. Angerman was sort of Fritz, you know, he was him because he had that relationship, and the whole thing was just so tied in together that it was marvelous, and how Angerman turned and became this person that wasn't going to betray him. It was really an excellent film. That's all I can say.
Well, thank you. Yes, I appreciate that. Jackie had something else?
Well, I was going to say, when you think about it, Eichmann turned into Fritz Bauer's friend, the one who wouldn't sign the papers. So it showed
Exactly.
the two sides.
You went just where I was going to go. That's exactly what they're doing. Is the idea of loyalty and not going the wrong way. But yes, it showed that. Marilyn Rosh.
Yeah, I just wanted to say I also learned a lot from the film, and I thought it was excellent. But I also want to say that I respect the way you did so much information, and your presentation was really added to the glory of the film. So I want to thank you for that.
I appreciate that. Thank you very much. But it's all of you that make it worthwhile for me to want to do that. It's among the other things I wanted to say, and Clara started to bring it out, in Argentina, there is an area known as Bariloche. I don't know how many of you are familiar with it, but it looks like the Swiss Alps. It's mountainous, snow-covered, and it was where a lot of Germans, Nazis, that rat line sent the Nazis to go. They even so much as did plastic surgery on some of them so that they can go out into the world and not be known. It's where Mengele went, and then finally escaped from. So this is a lot of governments participating in protecting them after the war. You have to remember, a lot of them left with a lot of money, and these governments wanted that money, or at least to lead to it. So it was important. It was important to them. There is so much history that we've yet to learn, that I think is will come out, and I will have some other films dealing with these subjects. I think they're important. So, anyone else? Oh, Wendy, you had your hand up. I'm sorry.
Wendy, you need to unmute yourself.
Yeah, you need to unmute yourself, Wendy.
See, I can ask. Okay. Let's see.
You there, Wendy?
Oh, I'm trying to unmute her.
Okay, I'm unmuted. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes, we can.
Okay, I was going to. I watched that whole Eichmann trial. It was devastating to see that entire trial, and Eichmann in that glass cage, in that glass box with an Israeli soldier behind him. And after the trial, and all the newspapers and all the comments, Eichmann is the only person sentenced to death by the state of Israel. And after that trial, everybody knew so much more than they ever had read before or heard about before. It was just a incredible, monumental trial, and it showed how inhumane a great human society could be.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's evil and monsters are not a fantasy. They're real. Evil is real, and it exists everywhere. And when people are given the opportunity, and we saw that here, when a leader gives people the opportunity to act out, they will, and they have, and we've seen it. And this is what's dangerous. This is what's dangerous in any country, in any place, at any time, is for someone to, stand there and give a group the opportunity to do what they did on January 6th. Susan Mann.
Yes. The other a purpose of the Eichmann trial was to educate the Israeli youth, who up to that point, people didn't talk, the parents didn't talk about the Holocaust.
Good point.
And it really, did that, made quite a stir and taught them history that they hadn't known before.
Yeah, in addition, it taught the German youth the Germans also were very quiet about it. They didn't want to deal with it. And there was that next generation in Germany. They too wanted to know, and it was kept quiet. And now this next generation are the ones that are dealing with it. I mean, these people who are in their 40s, their 30s, 40s, and 50s are the filmmakers. They're the ones who are dealing with, just the way the third generation here is dealing with it.
Right.
It's very important, and that's what these films do. That's what these films and books, they all do that. But it's film. It's film and television that really gets the message out for people to see how important it is to deal with the past.
For the German youth, the film The Nasty Girl,
yes,
depicts that.
Yes.
Where she does this school project and she thinks, she lives in this little village and she thinks, they were all fine during the war. And then she uncovers more and more and more stuff, but she receives resistance along the way. And then eventually, the sad truth is revealed and she goes on to be a journalist. But she was just in high school when she started this project, I think.
Yes, and unfortunately, it's a film that doesn't get played much. I have been trying to get it. It is a very difficult film to find on streaming, as well as getting as a DVD, which I'm still trying to get. But thank you for mentioning it. Okay, anybody else?
Shelly?
Anybody else out there? Yeah.
Shelly, in the chat, Clara has written, Bariloche was where most of the Germans went.
Yeah, that's what I was saying. That's where they escaped to, because it looked like Germany. It looked like the Alps in Germany. Anybody else out there want to contribute anything? Marilyn?
Yeah, I just want to know, does anyone know how this information is presented to the students in Germany? In other words, is this incorporated into a curriculum of any sort on any level? I don't know that.
Well, as far as I know, in both France and in Western European countries, there are survivors. There are people who go and lecture. They do lecture in schools. They go. It is part of their curriculum. It's a very important part of their curriculum because it's their history. It's their history, and it's. But I will also tell you that in the last few years, there's been a rise in the populist and nationalist fronts in Germany as well as here. But there has been a rise in the extreme right. I don't know how many of you follow that news, but last year there was about 100 members of the police force that were found to have a secret pro-Nazi cell. They were all arrested or released, from duty. I think they're still pending prosecution. So it's this is why it is important to get that information out constantly. I will tell you also, the film was very well received in Germany. That's one of the important. That's the bottom line is we have to remember this film was done initially for the Germans, for the German people. And then it's brought out into the world. So it was, and I will tell you, it was received very well. So anyone else? Well, terrific, great conversation. I want to thank you all for your participation. Now let me tell you a little about what's coming up. Next month we move into a lighter area. A warm area. It is summer and it is a summertime film. The Elephant and the Butterfly. The Elephant and the Butterfly. It was back in 2018. It won an important prize here in the States, the Heartland International Film Festival, which is a big festival of both foreign and American film. It won the grand prize. It's a simple story. It's a beautiful story. About a young man who returns to his hometown in Belgium after a period of time reuniting with his ex-lover, who has a 5-year-old daughter who he's never met, and by a turn of events, he winds up having to take care of her by himself for a couple of days. And what we see is how prepared was he for this, and what will ensue? It's a beautifully shot film. It brings out richness. It's gentle, it's leisurely, and I guarantee you it will melt the hardest of hearts. It will melt the hardest of hearts. So I look forward to seeing you when we discuss the film, because it is one that deals with a lot of symbolism, a lot of emotional and psychological metaphor. It's a tasty film, and you'll understand what I mean when you see it. Have a good couple of weeks. I'll see you soon. I think, what is it, August 8th is the next film. So I'll see you in 2 weeks.
Thank you,
Take
Sal.
care. Enjoy.
Thank
Stay
you so
well.
much, Shelley.
Thank you so
Thank you,
much for another
Shelley.
exciting evening.
Yes, thank you so much. And thanks to everybody for participating this evening. See you next time.
Yes. Okay. Good night.
Good night, everyone.
Thank you, Julie.
Yep, thank you too, Shelley. See you next
Okay.
time.
Okay, great.
Bye.
Bye.
You have to cancel the recording.
Yes, thank you so much. I need you all.